Welcome to another of my coloured pencil videos. This is a little different to my usual videos, and the reason being is that I was invited to be a guest artist for the Animal Artists Collective. The Animal Artists Collective was founded to provide a platform for emerging artists, promote positive messages for animal welfare and conservation, and connect artists to their communities. The original artwork produced for the Animal Artists Collective is always made available for sale, and at least 50% of the proceeds are donated to a non-profit animal conservation organisation. All the details, including those of participating artists, can be found in the description below. The first theme for 2019 is insects. So I've never drawn an insect before. My portraits are usually of furry animals, so what better insect to choose than a fluffy bumblebee? So I'm just going to give you a few facts about bumblebees before I start to kind of talk through how I created the piece, what pencils I used, paper, etc. So there are over 250 known species of bumblebee worldwide, with 24 of them in the UK. They're very peaceful and non-aggressive and very social, living in colonies of up to 150 individual bees, which is actually quite small compared to honeybees that can have up to 50,000 bees. Bumblebees are on the decline in Europe, North America and Asia, and this decline will have a catastrophic impact on wildlife and our environment. Around 1/3 of human food requires bee pollination. Many arable and horticultural crops depend on bumblebees for pollination. Queens forage and build nests in hedgerows, and in some regions where hedgerows are scarce, crop yields are already failing. Bumblebee conservation is genuinely something we can all play a major role in. Just by planting wildflowers in our gardens or in pots will have a huge impact. Okay, so just talking you through some of the materials that I've used to create this piece. It's approximately 8 by 10 inches. The paper I've used is the Clairefontaine Pastelmat, and it's the board version in white. I tend to use the board versions of Pastelmat rather than the card version. The white in particular, because it's an awful lot smoother than the paper. I have no idea why, but it's more like a hot press paper than the sort of rough texture that you normally find on Pastelmat, and it's a really fantastic surface for coloured pencil, which is the medium that I predominantly use. So I'm using the Clairefontaine Pastelmat board. I'm then using some pastel coloured Panpastels for the background, and then Faber Castell Polychromos and some Derwent Lightfast in there as well. The Panpastels are they're fantastic for an underbase to your coloured pencil drawings, or to create a background, as I've done on this particular piece. They go down really smoothly, and actually what I did before adding the Panpastel to the background was put their colourless blender down. So as it says, it's colourless, and it just gives a smoother base for the Panpastel to then go down on, and you get this wonderful ability to be able to blend the Panpastels together so that you don't get any sort of like, well, it's a seamless blending basically, and that's worked really well, particularly in this piece, because it is I wanted that lovely smooth background. I didn't particularly want any texture or anything in the background, which is why I went for the colourless blender in there. I started to pop in a little bit of the colour into some of the flowers at the top of the piece to begin with. But then actually I decided that I wasn't going to do that for the rest of the piece, purely because I prefer to use pure coloured pencil on the Pastelmat rather than over the top of the Panpastel. So you can see this part of the video, I've got pretty far in with creating the actual bumblebee. And I have to be honest, I had so much fun creating this piece, especially the blurry bits of the flower. They really were actually a real joy to draw, because I don't normally get that type of effect on the pieces that I usually create. I am using Faber Castell Polychromos mostly. They are my go-to pencil. They really are. They're oil-based, they're relatively hard. You can build up the layers beautifully, especially on the Pastelmat, which takes, you know, a huge amount of layers anyway. They keep a really lovely sharp point, and actually, if you've seen some of my previous videos, you'll know that I don't normally sharpen my pencils very much at all, which I know probably will make quite a few coloured pencil artists cry, but I tend to, on the Pastelmat, use them quite blunt, because I don't find when I'm putting the initial layers down that I need to have a really sharp point. However, when creating this this little bee, I found that I really did need sharp pencils, because the details were quite small, and the areas that I was working on were quite small. So I tend to draw dogs and horses and cats and that type of thing, and I will create my tonal values first before going in with detail. But creating something like this, where there are so many different sort of tiny areas to work on, the detail comes really quite quickly. You can see on the bit that I'm working on at the moment, I know it's quite speedy, but you can see how the layers are really built up. So there's some dark reds in there, there's some blues in there, there's some oranges in there, yellows, purples, and it's all built up before any of the detail is added. That's quite a large area. If you look at sort of like the eye area or the area above the eye, that's quite a small area. So to keep a sharp pencil for those bits was actually paramount for this piece. So you'll also see me using a few different tools throughout the video. So I have my usual Scotch magic tape, which I use for sort of like subtraction methods. The way that I build my layers up, I will add pigment, and then I'll take it away, and then I'll add it again and take it away and add it again. What's happening when I take the pigment away is I'm not taking everything away, it's leaving some of the pigment behind, but it gives me these lovely shapes to work with. You can see on the bee, you can see these little sort of strands coming out of the flower. You know, being able to create those without having to sort of work around them is, I find, really, really useful. So I use the Scotch magic tape. You've just seen me use it very quickly there, literally just popping a piece of tape onto where I need a highlight, pulling out very gently, drawing over the top of it with either a pencil or a stylus or something like that, and then taking the tape back off the paper, and you can create these really specific highlights, which I find just fantastic, but especially for drawing fur and that type of thing, but just brilliant for you know, this type of subject here, the flowers and everything like that, so that you can put all of that lovely colour down and then just pick out your highlights. Another tool that I've been using for a while actually, and I'm using more and more, and I've started to really work on techniques using it for fur, is this tool that I'm using at the moment, which is a slice tool. Now you'll see it's got a piece of tape wrapped around it. That is purely because I bought the wrong one. I bought the retractable tool, so the blade just pops back in again, so I've just wrapped the tape round to stop the blade going back in. It's fantastic for this particular paper, the Pastelmat, and for coloured paper, because it doesn't actually damage the paper, so you can just kind of scratch off tiny marks and leave these beautiful highlights. So coming to the end of the video, I hope you've enjoyed it. I've really loved being part of the Animal Artists Collective, and hopefully I'll do some more videos for them again soon.